Hi, I'm Dr. Evelyn. I'm here with my producer and publisher, Melanie Davis. We're going to talk about the process of writing the memoir.
Hey, Evelyn. I'm excited to talk to you about this because being the publisher, this is kind of my area of expertise when it comes to really helping you with your advocacy. I am not an expert in the experience of going through domestic violence myself or family court, but I am in helping people to share and preserve their important stories and help other people with them. So I'm really excited about what we're going to be talking about today.
Thank you so much, Melanie. I'm excited also.
So you can see that I have your book here on my shelf. I'm very proud of it. Beautiful cover, very empowering. Let's just start out for a minute and talk about your selection of the title and why you chose this image for your cover.
Okay, I selected that title because I feel like I am an advocate for a lot of people that have been silenced. And excuse me, as I said before, that picture came from me fighting an entity that I didn't know what it was called. It took years out of my life. I didn't know what it was called, but I knew something was happening.
You just sensed it. Yeah. Because at the time that picture was taken, that was long before you actually wrote your memoir. It was how
Maybe a
much?
year or so
Okay,
before
good.
I actually wrote the book.
Yeah. I love it though. I love how you've got these big boxing gloves on, perfect color, domestic violence awareness, and you're just looking up in a hopeful way. Like you know that you're going to overcome this fight that you're in. And that really is what your book presents. It's an important book. So let me begin with this question now. What point did you realize, because you said, you took this picture before you actually started writing. What point did you realize that your story needed to be written? Was there just like a moment where you're just like, I have got to write this down? Or did it kind of chew on you for a while? Can you just kind of talk about the process of getting to the point where you started writing your book?
Well, several people came to me and said, Evelyn, you really need to write a book. And I'm like, I'm really not a writer. I know something happened, but I began to question myself. Can I really articulate what happened? And I kind of removed myself out of the way as I look into the news and talk to others about how rampant domestic violence and injustice is. I just buckled down and said, this needs to be written down because this is not about me. This is to help other people. I believe because what happened to me, I'm not the first person it happened to. It's happened to millions of other people, but maybe they may not have had the strength to write it down, but some way I mustered up enough strength. I prayed and I began to write it down after I was encouraged to do so. I didn't want to do it, but people kept encouraging me to do it, so I did.
So, how long did it take you to write? Was it just something you just kind of dove into and knocked it out, or did it take a long time?
It took a long time because I visited some places that I thought that I had forgotten about, and it kept taking me back into the past. And to be honest, I was re-traumatized in a way when I started writing the book, but re-traumatizing was healthy because it answered a lot of questions that I had about myself when I walked around for years thinking that I had gotten over all of these things and I hadn't.
Whenever you write your story, you have a chance to examine it kind of from a perspective of a researcher instead of the one who lived it. You're kind of looking back on it with a different frame of mind, and you learn so much. Did you feel that you got a lot of healing out of the process?
Besides going to therapy, number one, when I wrote it down, I felt like I became empowered and something happened. I just felt healed and felt like I didn't have to walk around feeling ashamed or anything like that because everybody has a story to tell. And I just don't feel like this was my information for me to keep. I
Right.
feel like it was a reason that my higher power, who is God, allowed these things to happen so that other people can be healed.
I love that. I think that's when you really became Evelyn the Advocate, was when you took the time to put your lessons and your wisdom down and then took the step. Before we move into the publishing process, because I definitely want to talk about that, I would like to ask a few more details about the writing process. And that is, was there a chapter in this book that was the hardest to write, and why?
When I finally got into family court, because there were years of just confusion that I did not understand. When I revisited family court, that was very hard for me to do because I lost my child. All of my rights were violated when I didn't know what the legal abuse was called. It was called criminal conspiracy, and I had never heard of that word before until I started doing research. And also, I believe it was called fraud upon the court because the orders that were gone against me were written against me. I feel like they were all perceived from fraud because I never had legal representation.
Yeah, that is really hard. I know that you've said before going into it, you had no idea that you wouldn't get a fair trial. Not only did you not get a fair trial, you had 14 years of not getting fair representation and paying $100,000 for it. You talk about that. So I can see where that would be very hard to have to face again in the process of writing the book. So what are some of the things that you hope readers will take from reading your book? Can you share some of the specifics that you've put in there?
That it would encourage people to tell their stories and to figure out what happened to them instead of having to live with trauma and having unanswered questions. It's the hardest when you don't have any answers. That's the difficult part of things. For me, that was just I just could barely go on without knowing that having answers. But now that I have answers, I've been able to come to pieces with what happened. And I want to encourage the public that this can happen to you.
Yeah. Well, if you don't mind, I'm going to grab your book off my shelf and I have highlighted some parts. I think it's always nice for listeners to be able to actually hear some of the content to kind of understand what the book teaches.
Okay.
Um, I think that'll be a good process. So let me begin. I think your story starts powerfully right at it just kicks off. So my first selection is right there. It's the first paragraph of the preface. So what I'd like to do is I'm just going to read what I've chosen. And then if you'd like to comment on that, I think that'd be great. So this says, for those who know me, I typically move in silence. It is not easy for me to share all I've been through. For this reason, I am often misunderstood. Within the past few years, I have met people and encountered circumstances that have pushed me to share my experiences of domestic violence and injustice. In those moments, I've come to realize that my experiences were for a reason much bigger than myself. And I know you've already commented on this, but the part that I really love that, I hope you'll expand on more is the feeling that all you've been through is for a reason so big. Can you talk about what that feels like and kind of the good that's coming from this experience and sharing your story?
Feel like it's so big because there are millions of people out in the world that we have not encountered that have gone through the same thing, similar or worse. And they have something, a guide that they can get some answers to free themselves as to what's happened to them. Because as I keep reiterating on, the not knowing part is the part that makes you sick.
Yeah.
That is the part that may make you behave in different ways that you don't normally behave. You may pick up some habits that you wouldn't normally pick up because of the not knowing.
Yeah. How does it feel today, where you sit right now, to be a published author, a YouTube channel host, syndicated radio host, with your story getting out there, reaching this bigger than you level? How does that feel?
My eyes are beginning to get watery now because I never thought after 14 years and all of the pain that I had to go through that I would be sitting here, but I betted my life on it that I wasn't going to give up because this wasn't for me. It was for other people.
Well,
I'm
you're
sorry,
very
but
fair. No, don't apologize. I think it's very profound. I really do. I think it's amazing. Your book, when did we publish this book? How long has it been?
I think September 2025.
September. Okay. And just for context, for those, who might watch this in the future, we're sitting here on January 3rd, 2026. So not too many months. And in
It's
that
not.
time, you have built a YouTube channel that you've got well over 3,000, almost 4,000 viewers, maybe almost closing on what, which may not sound like a lot, but that's actually for a few months being out there, that's fast growth. And now your advocacy radio show is part of a syndicated network reaching untold numbers of people. It's amazing. I think there's, I know this is a little it's really not off topic, but to be able to just stop and say, whatever you're going through, there is purpose and
Yes,
there's
there
opportunity
is.
coming. You couldn't be the advocate that you are without having gone through what you have.
There's no way because I wouldn't be able to reach the people that don't have a voice. And I'm being able to reach those people through my life experience, not something that I got out of a textbook. This is real life. This is a real situation that I had to go through. And that's where this knowledge and experience came from.
Well, that's the perfect segue to my next excerpt. And this just comes from a point in your life when you started to really experience this domestic violence, but didn't know that's what it was. It's from chapter 4 titled Toxicity and Abuse. And you say, I got pregnant while in the 10th grade. 10th grade. Oh, you were just a baby. And decided to quit school. Even after my first footstool smacked me so hard that my nose started to bleed, I was completely naive to the fact that I was in an abusive relationship. I believe that I was in a state of shock, especially when considering that I was only 15 years old and no one had ever talked to me about intimate partner violence, IPV, also known as domestic violence. IPV includes physical, sexual, and psychological abuse with a romantic relationship. It's important to note that statistics show that 1 in 4 women will experience domestic violence at some point. Not only that, but it is the leading cause of injury to women. Now that begins to quantify how important your message is.
In the state where I live, South Carolina, we're number 6 in the nation for domestic violence. And we're not a large state. And to me, that is alarming. And not only that, when you watch anything, things pop up on your phone, especially domestic violence happens every day, but it seems to highlight itself more during the holidays. And it's very sad. If people could be educated about what this really is and just gain some knowledge, hopefully more lives can be saved that are that are taken.
Yeah. It's not a small problem.
It's a huge problem.
Domestic violence is not a small problem, and neither is the corruption of family courts. And
That's
so,
right.
yeah, you're definitely feeling a great need in sharing your story here and teaching what you have. So let's jump to an excerpt now that takes on this family court. So this is from a later chapter titled Trials and Tribulations. And you write, the Chester County Family Court System assigned several guardian ad litems on my child's behalf. A guardian ad litem is a lawyer or non-lawyer representative appointed by the court to act on behalf of another who is incapable of representing themselves. Their job is to conduct investigations into matters that may not be brought before the court by representing attorneys. The first guardian ad litem was an attorney. I informed her of the sexual abuse and the 12 years of domestic violence that I endured during the marriage. This information was ignored. The guardian ad litem never stepped a foot in my apartment during the investigation. According to the invoice the guardian ad litem submitted to the court, she interviewed at least 10 witnesses on my ex-husband's behalf. The only person she interviewed on my behalf was me. She never contacted any of my witnesses. For services rendered, or the lack thereof, in my opinion, I was ordered to pay her $1,369, all the while my second footstool, my abuser, obtained temporary custody of our child. I recall how sick and depressed I felt because I did not know what was going to happen to my child. As if the emotional, sexual, and financial abuse within our marriage weren't enough, he was practically allowed to abuse me legally through the court during our separation and after our divorce, and that he did. I just think that this paragraph from your book does such a good job of just showing how wide and deep the corruption is against just a fair trial and the harm it does both to you and to the child. Do you wanna just talk a little bit more about that?
That attorney who was a garden at litem, I would say had one of the worst attitudes that there is, just unprofessional. I can recall, my mind goes back to the trial, something that happened at camp involving my minor child. And I went to the camp to find out what happened. And you would have thought that I've had committed a felony when it came down to this garden at litem. It's like it wasn't even my child that we were talking about. She didn't want me involved in any
As if
manner.
you had no right at all to be
No rights. And
concerned
then
about.
she wanted my money, and she got my money
Yeah.
for nothing.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to point out just all the players in the system. You know, it's not just the lawyers having their deals, I am sure, because we see them not representing you and yet charging you, but even just all of the different people who are involved in the whole family court process, treating you like you're already tried, convicted, and sentenced as, like you said, a felon, when you all you're doing is just trying to protect your child from having suffered so much.
That they had made up in their minds, just thinking back, those people had made up in their minds what they were gonna do, how they were gonna do it, and nothing was gonna be said. But they had no idea that God was going to allow me to file an appeal to get all this evidence on the record of their civil conspiracy and their public corruption. And this is only the beginning. I have no plans to stop talking about this.
Yes. Uh, I love to hear that. And that's what needs to be happening. Of course, in our last episode, you talked about having to go pro se. You finally had to just get away from all the players and do it yourself. And that's so important. Our time is drawing short, but I do want to just put a little plug for the next episode that's coming up. You're going to be talking with Marianne Petrie, who's the author of the Raised by These Wolves book series, who also had to become pro se in order to have any success in court. So the two of you will be discussing that, which is potentially one of the most important things I think that you have to teach besides just raising awareness is how people can effectively defend themselves so they aren't just throwing money at the system that has no intention at all of helping them.
That's right. There were years that went by that none of my evidence was presented to the court, but somehow, some way, God gave me the strength to go back to the beginning and bring this evidence before the court.
Yeah. Well, I look forward to learning about that in the next episode.
Thank you.